From choosing the right variety to rinsing, soaking, seasoning, and fluffing, cooking rice can be a minefield. Here are the mistakes to steer clear of when prepping rice. While we're all familiar with white rice and may have tried basmati or jasmine rice, these varieties are just the tip of a colossal iceberg. There are over 40,000 types of cultivated rice, most of which demonstrate different characteristics when cooked. This, in turn, leads to different textures and consistencies, both of which can have a huge impact on a meal.
White rice, brown rice, those are just some of the rices I love. Also basmati.
Rice is usually classified in two categories, long grain indica and medium or short grain japonica. While there are plenty of options within these two broad categories, two stand out as the most popular and versatile. One of the most common types is white rice, which has had its husk, bran, and germ removed, resulting in a fluffy, mild grain. Another prevalent grain type is brown rice, which retains its germ and bran, making it chewier than its white counterpart. Some other commonly served rice types include basmati, a long grain rice aged 12 months to develop a pleasant nutty flavor. Arborio, on the other hand, is typically used to make risottos. This short grain rice contains a fair bit of starch, which gives it a glutinous, creamy texture. Other popular rice types include Chinese black rice, Thai jasmine rice, Japanese sushi rice, and wild rice, native to the Great Lakes area of the US. Just because you know how to make one type of rice doesn't mean you know how to make every type. If you're trying something new, read the package instructions so you don't end up over or undercooking your rice. The differences start before the stove. Many types of rice are better if you soak them first. Depending on the varietal, suggested soaking times range from 15 minutes to overnight. Not only that, but the amount of liquid you use for a single cup of rice differs depending on the type of rice you are cooking and the way you're cooking it. Many varieties require about a 2-to-1 ratio of liquid to rice for stovetop cooking, but you'll use far less for short and medium grained rice and more for brown rice. Even the cooking times are different. While many types of rice only need 15 to 18 minutes of stovetop cooking time, parboiled rice needs at least 20 minutes, arborio needs 20 to 30 minutes, and brown rice requires 40 to 50 minutes. Most rice types should be washed before cooking. After all, none of us want to consume dust, debris, and bugs with our dinner. Rinsing is particularly important for imported rice since it may have been processed with talc, a byproduct of the milling process. This generally doesn't happen with domestic rice, but rinse anyway. Rinsing generally makes the rice less sticky by removing the starch that accumulates on the surface of each kernel. So you might want to reduce the rinsing for sushi rice or arborio rice meant for risotto, as both require a bit of stickiness. In addition, rice produced in the US is sometimes enriched with vitamins and nutrients and shouldn't be pre-washed. Rinsing rice is as straightforward as popping it in a saucepan, filling the pot with water, and gently swirling the grains around with your hand. When the water draining from the grains is more or less clear, you're good to go. To make the job even easier, grab a fine mesh strainer and rinse the rice under running water. Some rice types, including wild rice and certain brown rice varieties, can benefit from pre-soaking. While failing to soak the kernels before cooking won't necessarily destroy the final product, if you have the time, letting the rice sit in water can take your meal to another level. Soaking rice has several benefits, including rinsing off phytic acid, a substance that impedes our ability to absorb iron and zinc. Pre-soaking also reduces cooking time, which can help some rice varieties preserve the aromatic oils often destroyed during the cooking process. Different grain types should be soaked for different lengths of time, depending on their shape, size, starch, and fiber content. Short grain starchy rice like arborio and standard polished white rice don't require pre-soaking, although white rice can be soaked for 15 minutes. Jasmine, basmati, and sushi rice should be soaked for between 15 and 30 minutes. Polished brown rice should be soaked for between 4 and 6 hours. Meanwhile, unpolished white rice, or unhusked whole grain brown, red, black, or wild rice, should be soaked for between 6 and 12 hours. Last but not least, Thai-style sticky rice is best soaked overnight. Cooking rice in the wrong pot can produce unevenly cooked or burnt grains. Obviously, it's important to choose a pot that's the right size for the amount of rice you're cooking. As a rule of thumb, a 2-quart pot is sufficient for cooking up to 2 cups of dry rice. The pot's material is also important, with stainless steel and aluminum saucepans topping the list of preferred options. This is because both materials offer great heat distribution, reducing the likelihood of the rice or other foods sticking to the bottom. As an added bonus, they can withstand high temperatures and are easy to clean. If possible, select a pot with a thick base to avoid hot spots, and be sure to choose a pot with a tightly fitting lid that can keep the steam inside.
I heard you don't have to rinse rice before you put it in the rice cooker.
Convenient and time-efficient, rice cookers deliver consistent results that can be difficult to achieve when preparing rice on a stovetop. Equipped with user-friendly interfaces and automatic cooking processes, these handy gadgets take the guesswork out of perfectly cooked rice. All you have to do is fill the appliance with the right amount of rice and water, close the lid, and press the on button. Once the rice is done, most rice cookers automatically switch to a keep warm function to ensure that the grain stays at the optimal serving temperature. This leaves you free to prep the rest of your meal without worrying about your rice getting cold. In addition, rice cookers are also very easy to clean. Simply place the inner pot and any detachable parts in the dishwasher and wipe the exterior of the appliance with a damp cloth. Whether cooking rice on the stovetop or in a rice cooker, the correct ratio of liquid to rice can mean the difference between perfection and disaster. The easiest, if somewhat imprecise, way to measure the ratio of rice to water when using a rice cooker involves the fingertip measuring method. Simply pop the rice in the cooker, rest your middle finger on top of the rice, and add water until it's level with the first joint of your digit.
Rice can be quite temperamental. You need to get the ratio between rice and water perfectly.
Those not as inclined to throw caution to the wind can pull out their measuring cups and consult your rice cooker manual before proceeding. Nevertheless, as a general rule, add 1.5 cups of liquid for each cup of basmati, jasmine, short or medium grain white rice. The rice-to-water ratio is slightly different if you use the stovetop method. For medium grain white rice, add 1.5 cups of liquid for each cup of dry rice. If cooking pre-rinsed rice, decrease the liquid by 2 tablespoons per cup. For a cup of sushi rice, use 1 cup of liquid. For a cup of jasmine rice, use 1.5 cups of liquid. And for basmati rice, use 1 3/4 cups of liquid. While rice cookers automatically cook rice at the right temperature, preparing rice on a stovetop requires a little more finesse. After all, the last thing you want is rice that's uncooked on top and burned at the bottom. For uniformly cooked rice, add the kernels to boiling water, give them a stir, cover them with a lid, and turn the heat to low. Let the rice gently simmer until it reaches the desired consistency. Sounds easy, but there's a trick. Every stove is different, and electric stoves pose a unique challenge since they aren't as fast to respond to temperature adjustments as their gas counterparts. So to prevent burning your rice, heat a second burner to a low simmer. Once the water in the saucepan on high heat boils, simply transfer it to the burner with lower heat. Adding seasoning to rice water can infuse the grains with additional flavor. This is especially useful when you want a more distinct taste without relying solely on sauces or toppings. Some of the most popular herbs and spices used to enhance the flavor of rice include dill, pepper, parsley, oregano, cumin, curry powder, paprika, garlic powder, and chili powder. Cooking rice in vegetable, chicken, or seafood broth or stock can also also elevate the flavor. While you can choose to replace 100% of the water with broth, for a milder taste, consider using a combination of broth and water. For a subtle flavor, start by replacing about 25 to 50% of the water with broth. Since broths often contain salt, it's important to be careful adding extra salt so as not to overpower the final product. If you like your rice creamy, consider cooking it in coconut milk or a mixture of coconut milk and water. While taking a peek at your rice while it's cooking can be very tempting, it's not advised. Steam escapes the pot each time you lift the lid. This can result in uneven cooking. To prove the point, Dixon Data removed the lid while cooking rice 3 times for 10 seconds each. In contrast to a pot of rice that had been covered with a lid throughout the cooking process, the periodically uncovered rice was dry at the bottom and wet on top.
How is it raw and mushy at the same time?
To make things easier, invest in cookware with a glass lid that lets you see what's happening inside the pot without risking your dinner. If lifting the lid while the rice cooks is undesirable, stirring it in the pot as it simmers is a definite no-no, unless you're making risotto. This being said, rice should be stirred when you first drop it in the pot of boiling water to ensure that the individual grains don't clump together later. On the other hand, stirring rice during the cooking process increases the chance that it'll release starch into the water and clump together. In addition, agitating rice while it cooks can break up the grains, turning them into an unappetizing glutinous mush. While cooking rice on the stovetop takes about 17 minutes, letting the grains rest in the pot for about 10 minutes will give it time to absorb any remaining water and swell. While some cooking professionals say it's important to keep the lid on the saucepan during this process to keep the steam trapped inside the pot, others advise against the practice. Once the rice is well rested, it's essential to fluff it before serving. There are several reasons for this. Since rice contains starch, despite one's best efforts, it's still likely to clump together during the cooking process. Fluffing the rice with a fork or a rice paddle helps to separate individual rice kernels. It also aerates the rice and releases any residual steam that could potentially overcook it right in the pot or even on your plate. And it's imperative to fluff rice with either a fork or a rice paddle rather than a spoon. This is because the prongs of a fork or the flat surface of a rice paddle allow you to gently break apart any clumps of rice without crushing the delicate grains. This, in turn, ensures that the rice maintains its distinct texture and doesn't become mushy or gooey. For best results, limit the fluffing process to around a minute.